Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Oh, Tony, it's time for our Michigan Monday show, but it's a Michigan Tuesday because, Tony, for the fourth week in a row, there was just too much to learn from Michigan playing a flat and uninspired game up against a grossly outmatched opponent. I don't even know where to begin this week with all of the new things that we've learned about Michigan football.
I watched it 3 times, and I learned new things each time. Actually, this is the 4th time watching it, if you actually want to count the first 3 games, because it's all been essentially the same game. This is one long, repetitive episode of NCIS Ann Arbor, and it's very standard. And oh gosh, I didn't see that coming. That was the bad guy. Who knew?
It's a little like Gilligan's Island, where all the episodes are more or less the same, and it's just like, how is Gilligan going to screw it up? Their brilliant plan to get off the island this time, and in this case, it's how is the bumbling incompetent opponent instead of the bumbling incompetent shipsmate going to screw up their plan to make it even slightly interesting? And Tony, boy, it's another week where they found. I thought this was the week that Rutgers was going to get off the island, Tony, but it turned out, spoiler alert, it was not.
No, it was not. It was the return of Jim Harbaugh from his Michigan imposed 3-game suspension for what they deem an offense worthy of suspending somebody for 3 games. Now, you may disagree with that. Michigan does not disagree with that because they are the ones who suspended him. Let's not forget. But anyway, so he was back, and without him there on the sidelines, Michigan was averaging 32 points per game. So you're thinking, oh, now that Jim Harbaugh's back, we're going to fire up this offense. Not quite. The offense scored 24 points in this one. As a whole, they win 31-7 over Rutgers. It was like all of the other games. It's the Michigan had 7 possessions in this game. It is you're just trying to get things over with as quickly as possible. It feels like that's obviously what Rutgers is trying. They're trying to shorten the game. They don't want to give up a bunch of possessions because they know they can't go toe to toe. So they want to make this a shorter fight. And that's Jim Harbaugh is perfectly okay with that. And this was going to be a short one. And as 2 people who had to rewatch it, I can't complain. It's just, there are not very many possessions going around in college football right now.
No, there are not it feels like there's not as many possessions as there were last year. But when you're trying to shorten the game, and then both teams are trying to shorten the game, and Greg Schiano and Jim Harbaugh are just trying to like out blunt rock each other to death, it's like there was barely, it felt like there was barely any football. It was 7-7 late in the first half, and it was one of those games where it's like, if you just see the score on the ticker, you're like, oh, that's interesting. And then if you're actually watching the game, you're like, no, it's not interesting. Michigan's just kind of screwing around, and they'll eventually out-talent Rutgers, as they seem to pretty much every year. This is one of these games that I take almost no conclusions from this, because they do this against Rutgers, it feels like every year. Ohio State will, play Rutgers, and they'll just kind of hit the Jets right off the bat and be up 35-3 in the second quarter and then cruise. Michigan just kind of puts it in neutral and like gently coasts down the hill, and they know eventually they'll pick up enough speed to pull away. But yeah, it's uninspiring is probably a little bit aggressive, but what's less inspiring than uninspiring?
I think just less inspiring than uninspiring. The first drive, Rutgers gets a 69-yard touchdown pass, which was basically Mike Sanders still slips, and then Rod Moore comes up and misses the tackle, and it was essentially a fluke play, and that was Rutgers' lone touchdown. Michigan, their first drive, they go 3 and out, and then their final 6 drives go 94 yards, 42 yards, 79 yards, 62 yards, 66 yards, and 59 yards. That 59-yarder was just running out the clock. The last 7 minutes of the game, they just ran out the clock. They missed a field goal on their 42-yard drive, but basically after that first drive, they had scoring opportunities or scored every single drive after that, other than, running out the clock at the Rutgers 22-yard line to end the game. So just a very, I would say, Tom, uninspiring not a performance, just an uninspiring game. The performances were fine. You only have a limited number of possessions and you're doing as much as you possibly can with them. I also found it interesting, Michigan's defense, which was fine. Rutgers took the ball into Michigan's 33-yard line on 4 of their 8 possessions, like at least to the 33-yard line. They obviously scored on one, to the 33 on another, to the 27 on another, to the 19 on another. They scored just once, and that was a 69-yarder, which didn't really equate to a drive necessarily. But Rutgers was able to move the ball a little bit, but it was never flashy. It's Rutgers, so it's never flashy. But they did have a little tiny bit of success, not anything to write home about. It's just interesting to me that they were able to get some yards, but I put some of that on quarterback Gavin Wimsatt, his ability to run. And then, they came into this game with Monangai, the top rusher in the Big Ten. Michigan held him completely in check. And not to move ahead to Nebraska already for Michigan, but with the way their new quarterback, Heinrich Haarberg, runs, I wonder if maybe that will make some things a little bit more interesting for this defense. So at this point, I'll take anything. Just give me something interesting.
Yeah, and I had the Gavin Wimsatt runs down. He didn't finish I think he finished with 28 yards rushing or something like that. It wasn't like a lot, but it was like, oh, look at Rutgers. They just picked up 2 first downs on one drive. That's incredible. Good for them. I have that written down, and does this matter at all for Ohio State? ? No, period. So, if you have a quarterback who's more likely to run, then sure, maybe that's something that we can keep an eye on next week for Nebraska. It has no appeal or impact whatsoever on the Ohio State game. So, which is not exactly Michigan's next interesting game, but maybe Michigan's second most interesting game sequentially in the course of the season. And I don't know that it matters that much with Drew Aller either. So, sure. The most interesting thing that happened on defense all day, well, the 2 most interesting things was Will Johnson back. Was this the first time we've seen Will Johnson this year? I couldn't remember if he made some cameo or something last week. Did he play last week?
It was like 2 weeks ago. He apparently got in for a few snaps, but really never noticed him, because when I wrote that he didn't play, I got corrected very quickly that he did play. And then, so I took that out of Michigan Monday, and then somebody else responds like, we didn't have him, so you shouldn't be so critical.
Yeah,
I can't win.
Listen, you whether they have Will Johnson for 2 snaps or not, that makes a huge difference when it comes to playing UNLV, which I think was the 2 weeks ago team. So, shame on you, first of all.
Yes.
Just generally speaking, but more specifically for whichever way you were wrong on this one, for that as well. But having him back on the field, I think he had a couple tackles. He had a tackle for loss, I think, and that's big for them. This is a little like CJ Stroud sitting out against Akron a couple of years ago, and Kyle McCord is a true freshman getting thrown in. It doesn't matter who you had the first 3 weeks of the season, but now you're getting maybe into slightly more more or less uninteresting games as they sort of head into Nebraska and all that moving forward. So yeah, good for him to be back. And the other interesting thing on defense was, man, oh man, that Mike Sainristil pick 6 was such a weird play, because you're watching on TV and your brain sort of is used to the patterns of where the football should be, and it was almost like a fumble Ruski, where it's like you're expecting the ball to be going one way, and there's another guy going running the opposite direction from where you think the ball is, and it's like, what is he doing with it? And Rutgers sort of had the same reaction. It was kind of the the pick 6 where the other team just kind of stops because they don't know who has the ball, and then he takes off running for a touchdown. So he ended up even on the day after giving up the touchdown pass. He scores a touchdown of his own, so he finishes even. Other than that, sure. I mean, what conclusions are we supposed to draw from Michigan's defense looking reasonably good against Rutgers, but also maybe a little bit bored against Rutgers, and Rutgers getting kind of to the periphery of field goal range, but not actually really ever threatening to do anything after the first 5 minutes of the game?
The biggest conclusion I draw is on that Mike Sainristil interception. Junior Colson nearly tackles him, but he doesn't. So another missed tackle for Junior Colson. I think maybe that is a concern, but no, this is an offense that is willing to be stopped or willing to be conservative, which is right in, I think, Michigan's wheelhouse. And again, Rutgers can run the ball, has been able to run the ball this season, and Michigan held them to 77 yards on 23 carries. And that includes a 15-yarder from Wimsatt, a 10-yarder from Monangai, and a 14-yarder from Aaron Young. So, like, basically, nearly 40% of their yards came on those three plays, but the biggest play on the ground was just 15 yards, and that was Wimsatt. Of course, we move to the Michigan running game. This was their best game of the season, but 201 yards on 40 carries. We talked last week on the podcast that this might be where you start seeing J.J. McCarthy run the ball more because of you're meeting up against better defenses. And he ran the ball 5 times for 60 yards, was sacked a couple of times, but he was involved. He ran some read option. He scrambled some. Blake Corum, 97 yards on 21 carries, long carry of 14 yards. And again, Tom, Donovan Edwards, 6 carries, 13 yards, a long rush of 8 yards. This to me now is, he started slowly last year and then turned it up. What is the reasoning behind this? And it's not just the offensive line. I mean, he's getting taken down by one guy. He's effective as a pass catcher, but I don't know if he's just not seeing things. He's not breaking tackles. This guy is not he had talked earlier in the season before the season about being one of the best of all time. 6 of 13 in this one. And that's been kind of standard for him this year.
Yeah, this felt like exactly like the previous 3 games, more or less, for Michigan, where it's like, it's a lot of Blake Corum, and he ends up somewhere around 100 yards, and he scores a couple touchdowns. That's just sort of feels like his average week now. Donovan Edwards, man, I was hoping the flow of the conversation would allow me to be the one who asked you what the heck is up with Donovan Edwards, because this is like the 4th week in a row that it's been super uninspiring. And he's not getting a lot of carries, but if you're averaging, like 6'3" per carry, you're not going to get that many carries, because if you're averaging, I think you average 2.2 yards per carry. That is not a first down if you run 4 times and you get 2.2 yards per carry. So that's not going to allow you to sustain many drives. I don't know what the deal with him is. If I didn't know better, I would say he's banged up and they, an ankle or something. But I don't think that that's it, because why would you play him in a game like this if he's banged up? So I don't know. I am not sure if he's not seeing stuff. I'm not sure if he is trying to do too much. I do not know. It does not look right. Blake Corum, on the other hand, after watching 4 weeks of Ohio State football, watching Michigan pick up 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 effortlessly with Blake Corum going up the middle is a delightful change of pace. It just feels so easy for Michigan on 3rd and short, 4th and short. It's just, okay, the line gets some push. Corum just barrels ahead and just very authoritatively hits the hole. And he doesn't pick up, he doesn't pick up 17 yards, but he picks up 3. And when it's 3rd and 1, that's all you need. So, yeah, I don't know. It's like the line is fine because Corum's running fine. So it's got to be something with Edwards, but I do not know what it is. The other thing that I was kind of surprised about, Tony, was Michigan is up, I don't know, whatever it was, 24-7 or something in the 4th quarter. And they're still running J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy's still getting hit. He's still in the game. I was very surprised that they let J.J. McCarthy take as many hits as he did in this game, in a game where it was never really in doubt. And, this is, to me, that this is a guy you've got to manage like Urban Meyer used to manage J.T. Barrett, where, okay, if it's Rutgers, you're going to have like 2 carries and that's it. And then when it's Penn State time, then you're going to run the ball 18 times. This just felt like a game where there was no sense in letting J.J. McCarthy take hits in the 3rd and 4th quarter of a game that Rutgers, you could put 7 more quarters on the clock, and Rutgers was not going to get to 24 points. So that seemed like a really curious decision to me. But I mean, Jim Harbaugh ran Blake Corum 21 times in a game that was like that. So I don't know. That this seems like this is maybe a load management kind of game that was, they didn't take that opportunity.
McCarthy finishes 15 and 21, passing for 214 yards, a touchdown, sacked twice. Tight end Colston Loveland, big game. He was effective down the field, and just watching him and also watching Notre Dame's effectiveness using the tight ends against Ohio State. There's some math there that you can equate and think that he might be in for a big game against the Buckeyes in November. 5 for 75 with the long of 35 yards. Roman Wilson, he was 3 of 59, wasn't as impactful as he has been. I finally kept out of the end zone for maybe the first time this season. Samaj Morgan, a true freshman, is getting more and more involved in the passing game. He had a touchdown catch on a really nice back shoulder throw in the end zone from J.J. McCarthy when, I don't know if it was the play before that or a few plays before that, it was maybe attempted a back shoulder to a tight end and to A.J. Barner, and it was not a good pass, and then he responds with a really good pass. But overall, the passing game, effective, methodical, really didn't, no kind of standouts, but that's other than Colston Loveland, but that is Michigan's passing game. This is the only difference this week was that Roman Wilson didn't have 3 touchdown catches.
Yeah, it does feel like Roman Wilson is becoming the guy. If Colston Loveland is not the first read for McCarthy, it feels like he's looking for Roman Wilson. He only had 3 catches, but that was when McCarthy made a lot of throws into just a wide open receivers. There was one that might have been to Donovan Edwards, and then there was one, the flea flicker to Loveland, and those were just like complete busts by Rutgers, and guys were wide open. He hit Wilson on 1 or 2 throws into fairly tight coverage. That kind of makes me think that he didn't connect with other guys on those type of throws. That made me feel like maybe Wilson's kind of his safety blanket almost. If it's not Loveland, it's Roman Wilson. No catches for Cornelius Johnson. That was weird to me. Only targeted twice, but McCarthy just he's the numbers are okay. 15 for 21, 214 touchdown. No picks this week. That's good, but took a couple sacks. It's just, it's all a little bit uninspiring, but it doesn't feel like it almost doesn't feel like they're really trying. It's just kind of like, all right, well, I'm just going to dribble the ball with my left hand because I just have to work on that. Like, all right, well, we're just going to do that because you're going to win the game. So we're just going to work on some stuff because we know we're not in any danger. It just okay. It was fine. It was a football game that 100,000 people paid to go to. Man, what a life, what a world.
It's dress rehearsal, basically. And like in Columbus, you can go see shows and plays on a Friday afternoon, which is essentially a paid dress rehearsal. And that's kind of what this stuff is. And you go see it with kids and old folks. And, that is the college football environment that I think everybody wants. But, 31 points, as we said, it was fine. It is what it has been. James Turner, field goal kicker, missed a 42-yarder. And you mentioned last week, got a pretty big leg. And the miss was way up in the net, but that was an unfortunate one. Unless Tom, I think I'm actually thinking of the Notre Dame game because I've been watching a lot of football at this point, so ignore me on that one. Overall, I don't know if there's anything more we can say about this one because, like I said, it's a dress rehearsal. And any other outstanding? Oh, I will say the offensive line. I wanted to talk about that. Still kind of mixing around the offensive tackles. Carson Barnhart starts at left tackle, and then we'll move over to right tackle to replace Miles Hinton, who Jim Harbaugh said on Monday is dealing with a little something right now. So then you bring in Ladarius Henderson, I believe, at left tackle, and he was not fantastic in this one, and I think they still have some concerns at tackle. But 200 yards rushing against a disciplined defense, I don't think you can be too banged up about that one.
No, this is a little to me like when Ohio State played Indiana, where they're obviously outclassed talent-wise, and the offense is not going to do anything no matter how long they have. But the defense is okay, and the head coach is a defensive guy by trade, and so you're gonna, it's not going to be super easy to go up and down the field on them. Michigan earned what they got; it was fine. I think the kicking is a little bit of it's not a concern, but it's like we're like one more missed field goal away from this isn't going to matter until you get to Penn State and Maryland and Ohio State on the schedule, but then it might really matter if you don't have a kicker you can trust. That's, I think, worth keeping an eye on. You mentioned Samaj Morgan earlier, getting involved on the offensive side of the ball. He just whiffed on a kickoff, just whiffed on a kickoff return, and was very, very lucky to get back, pick it up, and then just get it out to the 10. That was looming disaster on that one. I also thought it was interesting. Rutgers tried the short kickoff thing again against Michigan. I think I think people have kind of looked at that and thought, that seems like it's working okay sometimes. So I'm going to guess that Michigan, like a baseball, like a hitter who can't hit changeups. Like, what are you going to see? Well, you're going to see some off speed pitches until you show you can hit them. So I think you're going to see a bunch of just real random kind of chip shot kickoffs against Michigan until they kind of show that they can consistently field. They didn't have an issue this time, but until they show they can kind of consistently do that, I think you're going to probably see a few more of those.
Yeah, and if you can steal a possession, here or there, why not try it? I will also say Rutgers, as much as they could throw the ball, kind of went after Josh Wallace, the quarterback opposite Will Johnson, and had varying successes because they didn't really throw the ball all that well. We're done with that, Tom. Let's talk about what we all came here to talk about: Penn State, Iowa. I did not rewatch this one. I would not recommend anybody rewatch this one, but we can only talk about Michigan, the same Michigan game over and over again. So why not spice things up by talking about the Iowa offense, Tom, that had 4 first downs on Saturday against Penn State?
Yeah, I think let's transition here, Tony, with a former Michigan quarterback turned Iowa quarterback. And maybe my favorite quote, this came from December 7th of last year. Quote, please just keep on saying it's I'm going to say poopiest offense in college football. Please just think we're going to be so poopy next year. Please. Cade McNamara, done and done. Which of their 4 first downs were your favorite?
Probably the 3 by penalty. No, I'm sure that's not true. as I'm looking, no, 2 by rushing, 2 by passing. So 2 by air, 2 by sea. The craziest thing for me in this one, 33 total plays on offense for Iowa, 17 rushes, 16 passes, 50 fewer rushes or 50 fewer plays than Penn State had. Like, Brian Ferentz needs to average 25 points per play. They only had 8 more plays than the scoring requisite.
This was the universe evening things out after Iowa scored a touchdown with 30 seconds left against whatever directional Michigan they played last week to get to 41. This was the universe going, ha ha ha, not so fast, my friend. It was a game where sometimes you have a game where you get shut out and it's like, well, they were close a couple times and, passed up a field goal opportunity and, really could have, you were so close to getting on the board and getting 7-10 points. No. They were never. This was never close. This was never. And the most amazing part of this was, I'm trying to pull up the drive chart right now. Penn State's touchdown drives. They had a field goal drive of 53, a touchdown drive of 39, a touchdown drive of 19 yards. They had 2 long drives, and everything else was basically started, midfield or closer, essentially. So it just, man, oh man, I don't. Let's just, Tony, we're just going to read the drive chart. I know this is everyone's favorite thing. This is Penn State. Iowa goes 6 plays, 24 yards, and punts on the first drive. 3 plays, 30 yards, and fumbles on the second drive. That's the last good drive they had. 3 plays, 30 yards, and a fumble. After that, 3 plays, 7 yards, punt. 3 plays, 3 yards, punt. 3 plays, 0 yards, punt. 3 plays, minus 6 yards, punt. 3 plays, minus 3 yards, punt. 1 play, minus 6 yards, fumble. 3 plays, 7 yards, punts. And then they totally redeem themselves with a 5-play, 20-yard drive, which ends on a fumble at the end of the game. This is like if you were trying to be bad. If they were, Iowa has had, gambling related issues. So I certainly wouldn't want to accuse anyone of shaving points. But boy, if you were shaving points, how different would it? Well, I guess they would be less obvious about it, so that would be something. 17 rushes, 20 yards, 1.2 yards per rush. 6 plays, 16 yards, 6 for 16 passing, 56 yards. So let's see, that's less than 4 yards per attempt. Cade McNamara, 42 yards on 14 attempts. So that's 3 yards, a smooth 3 yards per attempt. Like 7 yards per attempt is not good. 7 yards per attempt is like, oh boy, that was an ineffective passing game. 3 yards per attempt, and that was better than the rushing. The rushing was 1.2 yards per attempt. How? You can tell me, oh, they were overwhelmed with the whiteout crowd. It was raining. It was raining when Penn State had the ball too. Like, holy smokes, this is bad even by Iowa standards.
Yeah, they had 7 punts, no points. So I was like, oh gosh, it's really bad when you have more punts than points, and they did that twice last year also. But they're wasting the defense again because they held Penn State to 3.8 yards per carry. They held them to 4.6 yards per pass. Like they're doing enough to win defensively. 37 attempts for Drew Aller for 166 yards, long completion of 14 yards. That is doing enough to win, and yet you eventually just collapse under the weight of your terrible offense, like in 2016 against Ohio State against Clemson, where the defense played well enough to win, but they still lost 31-0, and there's I think a pick six in there or something. But you can only withstand so much. You can't carry everything, and boy, this is as bad as it's ever was last year. Now, this is a very good defense, but still, there's no fight.
Right. And I mean, you go back to the Ohio State game last year, and Iowa scored 7 points, but it was on a defensive score. It was on a scoop and score by Jack, what's his name, the linebacker, Jack Campbell. Tony, we talked earlier about the Iowa's time of possession in the second half. That was before we hit record, I think. But do you know the middle 30 minutes of the game, Tony? What was Iowa's time of possession in the second and third quarter combined?
I have it right here, but I will allow you to give it to the listeners.
4 minutes and 40 seconds. How many drives in the Ohio State? How many drives did Notre Dame have in the game against Ohio State that were longer than 4 minutes and 40 seconds? It felt like about 5. How can you have? How is that possible?
Yeah, actually, they had, I've got it right here. They had three, but they also had a 3:35 in there. So, but there's no sustaining anything. Like I'm surprised they can sustain a down. Like you have to, but I think that's the only reason why they can. The allowance of this to continue going on, and there's a tremendous tweet out there with a picture of Brian Ferentz and Kirk Ferentz just looking at the sky like, how is this, what is sport? I think is basically the caption on that. And you go into the portal, you get a quarterback, you get some receivers, you've got a running game that you think can work. But you know what you didn't change? You didn't change the dude who is in charge of the offense, and he is not getting better. He is only getting worse. Like the numbers are just, it's embarrassing to be even talking about this at this point in time. I'm embarrassed for us.
I keep just going through this box score and finding more and more things. And I'm not going to slag Brian Ferentz anymore because I think I've used up my lifetime supply. I think the point has been proven, Tony. I think he might not be good at his job and might only have his current position because of who his dad is. I don't want to speculate any further on that. Tony, do you know how many tackles Penn State's leading tackler had on the game?
That was one of the things I looked at too, and that is hilarious. And also just the total number of tackles.
Yes, 3 tackles total for Curtis Jacobs and Abdul Carter, both leading the Nittany Lions in tackles. 24 total tackles on the game. They had 4 fumble recoveries and 24 tackles. Meanwhile, Tony, Iowa's defense, 0 fumble recoveries, 100 tackles. That is That is a disparity. I mean, there are lots of different things you can look at on this box score and go, boy, that's crazy. 100 tackles to 24 is maybe the craziest thing I've ever seen in a box score.
Now, to Iowa's credit, they did have 6 tackles for loss, so 6% of their tackles were in the backfield, whereas 5 of Penn State's 24 tackles were in the backfield. So 22% or whatever of your tackles are in the backfield, and Penn State's probably going to throw another shutout this week because they've got somebody who is not also very good on offense. So Northwestern and then Massachusetts. So, and then they play Ohio State. So they may have a couple of shutouts in the interim between now and when they play Ohio State on October 21st.
So what I'm hearing is that Penn State is already working on Ohio State this week in practice, right? I mean, am I wrong on that? I know Northwestern just had that real inspiring comeback win over Minnesota, and UMass looked so good against New Mexico State 4 weeks ago. But I mean, what are the odds someone is wearing a red jersey on the on the practice squad this week in State College? It's not zero.
No, and so they've got Penn State has Northwestern this week. Then they have a week off. Then it's UMass, and then it's Ohio State. So they've got
which one of those is the week off? Sorry.
Yes, exactly. Now they will have to pay attention to what Northwestern did this past weekend against Minnesota because PJ Fleck certainly didn't. So that's just something to watch there. Tom, anything else from Michigan, from Penn State, from any other Big Ten contenders, Maryland?
No. Okay, well, you said Maryland there. Apparently, sir, you were not aware that it's about to not be September anymore. So the Maryland season is just about over, I think. I think they have one more winnable one this week, and then the calendar turns to October and everything falls apart. So that'll be fun to watch. No, please, can we talk less about Michigan and Penn State? Because, oh boy, that's of all the football games last weekend, those were certainly 2 of them.
They sure were. So that will do it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Tomorrow we will have doing a rewatch of the Notre Dame Ohio State game, getting a better opportunity to check it out on TV, the first real opportunity to sit down and watch it. So we'll be breaking that down, seeing what we learned from that one. And as always, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com, become a member, check us out there at the message board, check out the content behind the paywall, all that good stuff. And of course, you can find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. If you are not yet subscribed to our channel, please do so. Had a bunch of additions over the weekend thanks to the Notre Dame coverage. So if you have not yet subscribed, please do so. Check out what's going on there as well. Plenty of stuff from South Bend, a ton of stuff from South Bend if you want to go back and relive all of that. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later.